What's up, everybody? This is Mr. Helton. I'm going to be helping you guys with what is our final assignment for the entire year. So, congratulations to everybody. This is the last assignment we're going to be giving you guys. So, um, it is Thursday, May 14th. That means you guys have a full week to get this assignment and any other assignments done to make sure you get a passing grade um, for this fourth quarter. All right, so here is the assignment. I thought I'd just kind of walk you through this before I go through the actual PowerPoint. The assignment is called the Cold War. There's going to be, the link to the Google Slides. I'll post this help video here as well. So I want you to, after reading through the slides and watching the help video, I want you to write a one-paragraph summary of the Cold War. Explain who is involved, why they engaged in this Cold War, and some of the things that happened during it. All right. So that's the purpose of looking at this. Is you guys are going to, look at the information, listen to the information, and then try and take all this information and put it into, 5 to 7 sentences. Now, there should be no copy and pasting from the internet. All right. The only information I want you to use is from the slides and video. All right. And please don't copy and paste from the slides and video. If you do, you need to give me credit because I'm the one who's giving you that information. So you need to say things like according to the PowerPoint or according to Mr. Helton's video, whatever, whatever. All right. Remember, Thursday, May 21st, 1 week from today, is the last day to submit work. The earlier you submit this assignment, the more time you have to make the corrections. Right. So if you submit this on Thursday, I will try and grade it on Thursday. But you're kind of really running out of time to make corrections if I give you feedback. But if you turn it in today or if you turn it in on Monday, that gives you a lot more time to make those corrections. All right, so here's the assignment. Let's start going through this PowerPoint. Here we go. All right, so the Cold War. Now, what do we mean by Cold War? All right, it kind of seems like a weird something, weird name for a war. A Cold War is one that is lacking heat or firepower. That's why we call it cold. So there were no guns fired. There was no actual fighting, meaning, so the Cold War means that there was no fighting between the two countries involved. It's almost like as if there was a beef between people on social media. There are no shots fired, but you're trying to make the other person look bad. The two people may actually be prepared to fight. There may even be some times where you think they are going to fight, but it never actually comes to the point where you start shoving each other or punches are thrown or things like that. So it's really just these two countries, and it ends up being the United States and the Soviet Union were really preparing to fight each other. And in addition to preparing to fight each other, they were training their citizens to hate the other country, right? That's what we mean by Cold War. So, a brief introduction, the Cold War was from 1945 to 1991. If you look at this date, 1945, oh, click, my bad. If you look at this date, 1945, that's when World War II ended. So the Cold War literally started as soon as World War II was over. It was an intense relationship between the Soviet Union and the United States. This war was not fought directly between the countries. Remember, it's a Cold War. There was no firepower. As you learned previously, the United States and Soviet Union were a part of the Allied powers during World War II. That means the United States and the Soviet Union were on the same side. Didn't really mean we liked each other, but we still were both fighting against the Nazis, so we had to work together. There were many differences between the countries. Cultural and political reasons separated the countries after the war. The countries had different ideas about economics and different ideas about government. The United States and the Soviet Union were the world's strongest nations after World War II. All right, so the war ends, and we automatically begin to show our hate for each other. All right, um, and then you guys remember how the war ended in Japan with the United States? We dropped an atomic bomb. All right, So the Soviet Union, who was distrusting the United States at this point, they were concerned that we had a bomb like that. It's kind of like if you notice that someone you don't like has gotten really strong and really big, you're probably going to be concerned about that, especially if that's a person that you think you may end up fighting. So the Soviet Union was very concerned that we had the capability to create a bomb like we just did. But the Soviet Union was also working on building a bomb like that themselves. They were working on building bombs. This began the period where the USA and the Soviet Union distrusted each other. All right. So you have, the United States, we're secretly building a bomb. And then we tell the Soviet Union, hey, we have this bomb. Well, the Soviet Union kind of had to act surprised. They actually knew because they had spies who were telling them that we were building this bomb. At the same time, the Soviet Union was also building a bomb. Right? So now we're starting to both kind of get ready for a war, and neither of us officially know that the other one is. Right? So there's a lot of distrust going on. Now, one of the main reasons, one of the big differences between the United States and the Soviet Union is this idea of capitalism versus communism. All right. So people who live in the United States live under the economic system of capitalism. Citizens in the United States have a market value, which means businesses and people control the production of goods. Citizens in the United States have a government that is democratic, meaning we vote for our leaders. So it is up to people like me and you and our parents and our grandparents and other people in our society. It is up to them to create the goods to sell. All right. That is what capitalism is. The idea of capitalism is if people control the production, they're going to make what other people want. All right. A perfect example of this is like the brand Champion. All right. You guys love that brand now, right? From what I see, you guys are all wearing it. When I was growing up, nobody was wearing Champion. All right. It was just wasn't a popular brand. All right. But then as people started wanting Champion more, Champion started making more products. All right. That is capitalism. All right. And just the fact that you can choose what you want. All right. United States, we also have a system that is democratic, meaning we vote for our leaders. So we have a presidential election this year. All right, we're going to be, voters are going to have to choose. Do you want, President Trump, who has been president for 4 years and who is a Republican, or do you want Joe Biden, who was a Democrat and was the vice president under Barack Obama? Now, the Soviets live under a communist system. They do not choose their own leaders. They do not have much freedom. The government controls production and resources in communism. The government decides where people live and where people work. So you don't have a whole lot of freedom in communism. The government says this is what we're going to make, and everybody is going to have to use this product. There is no Nike, there is no Adidas, there is no Champion, there's no Under Armour. You don't choose. There's one brand that everybody has access to. All right. The government decides where people live and where people work. All right. So you don't go out in Soviet Russia. You don't go out and buy a house. You don't get to pick. Like my wife and I, we just bought a house. We probably toured about 10 houses and we picked one that we liked the price. We thought it was big enough for us. We liked the yard. We liked all this stuff. You don't do that in communist countries. They tell you where to live. All right. Now, the idea behind this is okay, your life may not be as free as it would other places, but you're going to have the same thing as everybody else. All right. Obviously, in the United States, we have people who don't have a whole lot. Right. And then we have people who have a ton. In a communist country, pretty much everybody is almost at the same level. All right. Except for the government, who usually is insanely rich. Now, in 1947, the United States president, President Truman, gave a speech called the Truman Doctrine. In this doctrine, President Truman pledged assistance to countries that were threatened by communism. So in 1947, the United States president is coming out and he's saying, if you feel that your country is about to become a communist country, or if the Soviet Union is trying to take over your country, we are going to jump in and help you. So he's straight out coming out and saying, we don't want any more communism. We're going to help you fight it. That kind of ticked off um, the Soviet Union, right? So we're going to go through another PowerPoint real quick. So I'm going to open this. This is just a really quick capitalism versus communism PowerPoint that will kind of explain the differences a little bit better. So when it comes to private property, meaning can citizens own things that belong to them? All right. Most of us have phones. This is my phone. I pay for it. I paid for the phone. I pay my bill. You can't just, this isn't anybody else's phone except mine. All right. So in a capitalist society, yes, there is private property. Capitalism is based on the idea of individual freedom. You are free to own things and make choices that benefit you. All right. So if I want an iPhone, I can get an iPhone. If I think an iPhone would be best for me, I can do that. But if I want an Android, because I think an Android would be best for me, I can do that as well. I make choices that I am free to make the choices that I want to make and that will benefit me. Now, in communism, you don't have private property. The things that you have, your car, your phone, your house, your anything, your oven and your stove, those do not belong to you. All right? They belong to the community, which if you look at that word community, kind of looks like communism. They belong to the community, and the community is letting you borrow it. You see where I'm getting there? Where you don't go out and buy a stove if you need a stove. The government gives you a stove to have, and it's the same stove that everybody else has. Now, the problem with this is you have one government providing stoves for millions of people. Do you think some people are going to be left out in getting a stove? Yes, that's one of the main issues with communism is that you're putting it on the government to provide a small government to provide things for millions of people. All right, that's one of the big downfalls of communism. But with capitalism, not everybody has a stove because some people can't afford a stove. So that's one of the downfalls of capitalism is that sometimes because you allow people to have freedom, sometimes they don't make the right choices, or sometimes with capitalism it's kind of hard to get up in the ladder, and because of that some people who are born poor stay poor, and they may not be able to buy a stove or an oven or a car or anything like that. Government involvement in capitalism, there's very little to no government involvement. All right. Now, in true capitalism down here, the government stays out of the economy. They don't have anything to do with it. In the United States, we're kind of in the middle. Our government is not super involved, but it's also not involved. All right, we're kind of in the middle. In the United States, the government sets regulations to prevent businesses from acting inappropriately. So if you think about it, if a business wants to make the most money, it makes sense that they would pay all their workers $1 an hour because then the business gets to keep so much more money. Now the government comes in and says, "Look, you can't pay your people $1 an hour. You have to pay them, $8.50 or whatever it is now an hour. We think that's an appropriate wage for someone to make, the minimum wage." So the government comes in and does say, "You have to do things a certain way, or we will shut you down." All right. Now, in communism, you have a totalitarian government. All right. Look at that word, total. They have total control. The government controls everything, including the economy and the people. All right. And the job of the government is to institute communism. All right. So up here we have the United States. Down here we have Soviet Russia. Business, capitalism. Businesses are owned by individuals. Remember, they are free to do what they want. So people can open a business if they want. I'm sure some of us in this class, I'm sure some of us know people who own their own businesses. All right. People are free to do that, and the owners of the businesses benefit from their profits. Right? So like the guy who runs Amazon, Jeff Bezos, He is benefiting from his profits. That is his business. He started it, and now he benefits from the business. All right. Now, other people, like I'm trying to think of a business that's failed. I can't think of one right off the top of my head. But some people open up a business and it doesn't do well, and that owner pays a price. They have a consequence for not running a successful business, and usually that is losing a ton of money. In communism, individuals do not own businesses. All right. Um, and the job of the government is to control the distributing of resources. Remember, let's go back to the stove example. You don't have 15 brands of stoves in a communist country. You have one brand of stove, and it's the government's responsibility to distribute the stoves to everybody, right? And this is based on need, it's not on want. So, if someone loses their leg in an accident, say they get hit, they get in a car wreck and they lose their leg, all right? Obviously, that person would need some kind of prosthetic fake leg. Well, in a communist country, it's based on need, not want. So, if I lose my leg in a car accident, the communist government will, provide me with a leg, but they're not going to do it for Miss Tate, who doesn't need one. All right. So just because one person gets it doesn't mean everybody's going to get it, because some people may not need it. All right. Competition, right? And we're talking about competition between businesses, right? So in capitalism, competition exists among businesses for the purpose of lowering prices. You have what we call price wars. Businesses lower prices to get more customers. So let's say Nike has a pair of gym shorts, right, that they sell for $20, right? And then Adidas comes out with a pair of gym shorts that they're selling for $15, right? Now, some people may say, I just want a pair of gym shorts. I'm going to buy the Adidas pair because I get to save $5. So, what do you think Nike's going to do there? Nike will probably lower their price. Maybe they lower their price to $15. Maybe they lower their price to $14. And so now you have two companies who are fighting for business by lowering their price. And who does that benefit? It benefits the person buying the gym shorts, because now I have to pay less money for a product that I want. All right. Now, in communism, there is no competition because there's no individually owned businesses. Let's go back to that gym shorts example. There's one brand of gym shorts in a communist country. All right. So you get that one pair of gym shorts. If you don't like them, tough luck. It's not like you can go out and buy another pair. All right. And remember, the government is there to make sure people get what they need. Economic classes. All right. So we're talking about, we have different classes. So you might have lower income people, people who maybe don't have a ton of money. Then you have, middle income people, people who aren't poor, but they certainly aren't rich. And then you kind of have the upper class of the people who have a ton of money. So economic classes do exist in capitalism. People benefit from their labor, right? So in theory, on capitalism, people with more money have earned it. And this is in theory. In capitalism theory, if I have a lot of money, if I have $1 million, that means I have put in a lot of work or made the right choices to get $1 million. All right. The issue with that is, if my parents have $1 million, when I grow up, I am much more likely to be rich. I'm much more likely to be a millionaire if my parents were millionaires. That's the kind of downfall of capitalism is, you have a lot of celebrities who have money, and the only reason they have money is because their parents had money. All right. And then sadly, there are a lot of people in the United States who don't have money. And then if you look at their parents didn't necessarily have a lot of money either. All right. But there is an opportunity for people without money, the opportunity to earn more money. All right. So if there's a person who wants to make money, they can go get a job in an individually owned business. All right. And those businesses can fight for that person. Meaning, if, let's just take Skyline versus Gold Star. If I want a job working at Skyline or Gold Star and I go to Skyline, they may say, we'll pay you $10 an hour. Gold Star might say, we're going to pay you $11 an hour. That means more people may want to go work for Gold Star because you get paid more. So what is Skyline going to do? Skyline might end up paying their customers a little bit more. All right. So once again, this competition is supposed to kind of level the playing field for everybody and give people without money the opportunity to earn money. Communism, economic classes do not exist. Everybody is supposed to be on the same level. Everybody has a house, everybody has a stove, everybody has a car, everybody has what they need. Now, once again, this doesn't always work out because we're relying on a small group of people to make sure everybody has what they need, and that's hard to do, especially when honestly governments aren't very trustworthy. Sometimes you're not able to trust the government. A lot of people are really greedy and they will take more for themselves. All right. I think that's it for this. All right. So hopefully now you have somewhat of a decent understanding of capitalism versus communism. All right. Essentially, you have a capitalist. People are free to make their own choices, and they live with the consequences of those choices. In communism, the government is in control of of everything. All right, and we see how that can be bad. But we can also see how capitalism could be bad because sometimes people get stuck in where they're at. All right. So, how Germany was an example of what the Cold War was all about. All right. So, remember, after the war, Germany needed rebuilding. Germany had been bombed to, they'd been pulverized. All right. They also didn't have any leadership. Remember, Adolf Hitler was their leader and he killed himself. All right. So, they needed structure in Germany or another Adolf Hitler was going to come up. Because remember, when the government is a mess, usually it's the crazy, really loud people that get control. That's how Adolf Hitler got control. So what happened is the Allies, the United States, Britain, the Soviet Union, and France divided Germany into four sections, into four zones, and each country was in charge of rebuilding their part. All right. But how is this going to cause problems? The United States, France, and Britain are all going to establish a free and capitalist government, right? So three out of the four countries are very similar. But the Soviet Union is going to try and establish communism, all right? So we can kind of see how these countries are already going to start disagreeing. And to add to it, the United States and the Soviet Union, they don't trust each other anymore, all right? So here's a map of Germany. All right, down here you have the French section. Down here you have the American section. Right here you have the British section, and then there's a small section of America inside of there. Not entirely sure why. And then the Soviet Union was in charge of this section, and we're going to talk about what's going on here in a second. All right. So we divided Germany into four zones. And now it is our job to reestablish those governments. But we're going to have some issues with the Soviets over here trying to have communism and all of us having capitalism. What happened to Berlin, though? All right, so Berlin is the capital city of Germany. It was in the Soviet Union section of Germany. So if we go back, this is Berlin. The capital is inside the Soviet zone. All right. The United States, France, and Britain did not like this. They felt that this gave the Soviet Union more power since they controlled the capital. Think about it. If somebody took over the United States, if two countries took over the United States and they split the country in the middle, whoever is controlling Washington D.C. probably has more power than the other one. All right? The countries decided that not only would Germany be divided into four zones, but so would Berlin. This meant that the American, French, and British sections in Berlin would be surrounded by the Soviet Union on all sides. So if we go back, this is Berlin. You see the orange, we have the United States section of Berlin. You have the British section of Berlin. You have the French section of Berlin, and you have the Soviet section of Berlin. These three countries or these three sections are surrounded by the Soviets. So if you're going to, my bad, if you're going to travel from the American section of Germany to the American section of Berlin, you literally have to travel through Soviet territory. Remember, the Soviets don't like us, so they may not let that happen. This obviously caused issues between all the countries. The Soviet Union did not allow supplies into West Berlin, right, which was controlled by the US, France, and Britain. So these countries flew supplies in the air, which easily could have started a war. All right. So once again, we have Germany over here. We have Germany here, right? You have the four sections. Then you can see Berlin right here. All right. So what happened was is these three countries, United States, France, and Britain, we wanted to take supplies to our sections of Berlin. All right. Remember though, we had to travel through Soviet territory. Eventually, what they did, the Soviets did, was they blocked anybody from driving into these sections. All right. So what we did was is we flew planes and we would drop supplies. Now the problem with that is that could very easily be seen as an act of war. That could have kicked off another war. Luckily, no shots were fired, nothing happened. This is just a closer look at Berlin. See, we have American section of Berlin, the British section, the French section, and then obviously the Soviet Union. All right. So this is what this is, but just a close-up version. Now, the Berlin Wall. The Soviets who controlled East Berlin, so if we go back, Soviets controlled this part. They built a wall on this line. All right. Families and friends were separated overnight. They literally built this wall in like 24 to 48 hours. People who were visiting people on the other side of town were suddenly trapped on one side and couldn't get back. Many people tried to flee East Berlin, which was controlled by the Soviets, by trying to cross the wall, and many died in the process. All right. So, like, there's literally stories of people who lived in East Berlin, which was controlled by the Soviets, and they went to West Berlin to visit a family member, visit a friend, go on business. And then when they tried to go back, they couldn't because there was a giant wall there. So, like, where are they supposed to live? They don't have any money. They don't have a job. I mean, it was a really crazy point in history. All right. Here's a picture of the Berlin Wall. All right. Now, this is West Berlin, controlled by the Americans, the French, and the British. All right. Look at the wall. It's covered in graffiti. So the government in West Berlin was not stopping people from going up to the wall and expressing themselves, right? Also, look at this guy. He's like 15 feet from the wall, right? He's like right up on it and nobody's stopping him. Now look at East Berlin. Look at their side of the wall. Look at the other side. It's bare. Look at all this. You can't walk up to the wall if you were on East Berlin. You had to stand all the way back here. All right. So they this is a perfect picture to show West Berlin, you were free. East Berlin, you were not free. Here's also a diagram of the wall. So if we look at West Berlin, you have a car right here. You have people. We're right up against the wall. East Berlin, there was a border zone. So nobody could walk up to the wall. You had to stay back. Now, inside the wall, look at some of the stuff we have. We have vehicle ditches. So if somebody were to try to bust through the wall and drive across, their car would get stuck. Sorry, excuse me. Their car would get stuck in this ditch. There were spike mats. So if you jumped over the wall, you would land on spikes and it would injure you and or kill you. There were tank traps. So if somebody tried to bust through the wall in a tank, you would hit these tank traps and it would stop your tank. There was watchtowers. All right. And they guarded this 24 hours a day. They could see both sides of the wall. All right. And if they saw somebody in here, and this part was sand, so um, they could see footprints. If they saw anybody in here, the person in the guard tower would shoot you. All right. You weren't supposed to be in there. They had fences with barbed wire. There was a road. So if this guy over here finds out that there's somebody breaking the wall over here, he can jump in a car and drive really quick and then arrest the guy and or shoot the guy. All right. So you really see how they did not want people going in between East and West Berlin. All right. It really shows the differences between the freedom of the West and the non-freedom of the East. So it's our last slide, I believe. Nope, we got one more. So there were some what we call proxy wars during the Cold War. All right, proxy wars means Wars that weren't between the United States and Russia, but they were in between countries that the United States supported and the Soviet Union supported. All right. One example of this is the Korean War. So the United States fought on the side of South Korea, and the Soviet Union supported North Korea. This is an example of two countries trying to spread communism, the Soviet Union, and stopping communism, the United States. So the Soviet Union supported North Korea, and North Korea tried to take over South Korea to spread communism. United States was like, no, we're not doing this. We are not spreading communism into other parts of the world. So we fought on the side of South Korea and we tried to stop communism. So it wasn't a direct war between the United States and the Soviet Union, but it was a war between communism and capitalism. Vietnam, Vietnam War, same thing. The communist government in Vietnam is trying to take control, and the United States sent soldiers to support anti-communist fighters. All right. Once again, we're not seeing the United States fight Russia or the Soviet Union directly. We're seeing communism fighting capitalism. Cuban Missile Crisis. Cuba is a communist country and was supported by the Soviets. All right. It was also only 90 miles away from the United States. All right. If you go to Key West, Florida, you're only 90 miles away from Cuba. The United States was very nervous about the Russians or the Soviet Union being that close. The Soviets had missile bases in Cuba, so the Soviets put missiles on the island of Cuba, 90 miles away from the United States. The United States surrounded Cuba with warships in an effort to get the Soviets to get out. This is the closest the Soviet Union and the United States got to an actual war. All right, so we were just a few minutes away from them firing missiles or us firing missiles on each other. All right. One of the big reasons that this war didn't happen is this idea of mutually assured destruction, meaning if the United States would have started this war, they would have destroyed Russia, but Russia probably would have destroyed them as well. If Russia started the war, they probably would have destroyed the United States, but the United States probably would have destroyed the Soviet Union as well. That's why they didn't actually start the war. It also could have like destroyed the world. I mean, who knows how big this thing would have got. All right. So this is the last slide. You're going to learn a lot about this next year, so I really am only going to focus on it for a minute or so. Um, we were engaged in a space race, which was who was going to be the first to get a man on the moon? Was it going to be the Soviet Union or was it going to be the United States? Um, this was really just meant to, kind of prove that the United States was better or the Soviet Union was better because we have better science. It was kind of used as a propaganda tool, but also it would scare the enemy because now we have control of the sky. So if we're able to put stuff in space, we could shoot missiles from space at Russia, and that scared them. Or Russia could shoot missiles at us from space. Now, in 1980, in the 1980s, a leader took over in the Soviet Union that was more open to free economy and free elections. Also, the people in the Soviet Union were wanting to experience things from the outside world, like McDonald's. The line when Soviet Union opened up and they let McDonald's open up in the Soviet Union, the line was like 6 miles long or something ridiculous like that because they couldn't have those things. Because remember, people weren't allowed to own individual businesses. In 1991, the Berlin Wall finally came down. That was the end of the Cold War. All right. So once the Berlin Wall came down, the war was over. All right. So just let's make sure we finish this final assignment. Remember, the assignment that you need to complete is just a one paragraph summary of what we just learned. All right, who was involved, why they were engaged in this Cold War, and some things that happened during it. All right, so this is the last assignment you guys will be completing this year. I do want to thank everybody who has been working so hard during all this. I know it's been tough. We do appreciate it. We are going to have help sessions. We have one tomorrow on Friday, We'll also have a couple next. I don't know if we'll have a couple next week. We'll at least have one next week to help you guys on assignments. But thanks for a great year. I know it was a really weird year and stuff like that, but I am going to miss you guys. Be sure to come over and say hello to us when you guys are in 10th grade next year, and we'll always be around. So please reach out if you guys need anything. Other than that, I want you guys to have a safe and nice summer.